Speaking of household formations, let's chat with Stephen Cawelti. He is an attorney. We are not giving anybody legal advice, or he's not. I can't. I'm not a lawyer. But he's not giving legal advice. We're here to educate this morning. We're just going to have a chat. We're going to let you eavesdrop on Stephen and I chatting. And if you want legal advice, give me a call at 800-306-1990. I still won't give you, I'll give you Stephen's phone number. Good morning, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm great, Ron. How are you?
Doing wonderful. So divorce season. Well, I guess we can go back to household formation. I guess when there's a divorce, there may or may not be another formation because you're going from one household to two households. So is there a season for this? Is divorce? I used to think that I heard a lot from attorneys that, after the holidays, that's when people started getting divorced. Yesterday I heard from an attorney, it's school time. Is there any real season?
Well, it's kind of one and the same if you think about it. Those things happen when you've got less family stress on your hands and more time to plan and get your ducks in a row. So you're not doing that around the holidays generally. You're going to do that right after the holidays. You're not doing that during the summer usually when you've got the kids around, or maybe they're at camp a little here, a little there. So sure, it tends to happen during the school year because that's when people have at least a little more time to get things together.
So on the broadcasts over the last 13 years that we've been doing this, we've talked about, I believe I understand, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. There's basically three different processes. You've got the mediated, which is when people realize that they got married for a reason. They liked each other at one point in time. And now they can get out of this in a amicable way, so to speak. You got collaborative and you've got litigated. Is there more ways than that to go through this process?
Well, yeah, usually there's some combination of those things. So, for example, what I typically do is either mediation, which, if successful, keeps you out of court entirely. And then you're just submitting your paperwork to the court, and hopefully you're saving the drama that would otherwise fall on your family or your kids. Sometimes mediation falls apart because you get a certain way down the path and the negotiations fall apart, and then you're talking about another way to resolve your case. Collaborative is, there's two teams that are working, one on your side, one on the other side. The goal is still to stay out of court, but you're probably talking about a bigger team. And if that falls apart, then you got to hire a new team if you're going to go to court. And then litigation, of course, is sure, you may be trying to settle your case, but sometimes that takes the man or the woman in the black robe to make a couple of decisions before you see the writing on the wall and you get your act together to resolve the rest of your case. If you can't, that's what the court system's there for. You'll have a trial and you'll have a resolution.
So, again, most of us don't see a whole lot of these things. We hear about the most biggest time we hear about divorce is usually these big celebrities getting divorced or something along those lines. We don't really see the Mr. and Mrs. Smith down the street from Main Street America going through this process. And most of us have never gone through law school. We don't know what you know, but we see headlines and issues like that. So I'm going to throw this at you and see, the biggest headline right now has obviously been that a bunch of attorneys got together and came up with a resolution in the Hunter Biden case. They go to court and the judge starts asking questions and all of a sudden everything's blown up and nothing happens. Does that the same way it would work in a divorce case where the attorneys might get together and agree on everything and go to court and the judge says, no, we're not going to do that?
Pretty typically not. Almost always, if the parties have agreed and it's their lives, the court's going to sign off on it. There are cases where the court is going to look behind it. Generally, in family law, that's going to mean something that is considered to either be grossly inequitable, meaning if you want to, for guilt reasons or to save money or what have you, if you and your ex-spouse decide that she's going to get a little bit more or you're going to get a little bit more, the court doesn't really care. But if it looks like either third parties might be defrauded, where one party is getting almost all of the assets in order for the other party to escape some liability, yeah, you're going to get a family law judge that's going to look behind that and say, what's going on here? Same possibly with third party creditors, or, for example, to avoid bankruptcy. You will have a judge take a look at that and say, I've got some questions here. Now, that's aside from any procedural defects in the paperwork where one of the attorneys or a paralegal doesn't quite get all their ducks in a row in terms of what the court requires. That's different. But in the substantive terms, you should expect that a court is going to look at this at least. You should also expect that they're going to let you more or less do what you want. But if there's an iffy case, you better have some answers, and you may have to actually show up and explain it to a judge.
So my understanding that the next step that I would throw out is that if you do litigate, the judge has basically got the law is pretty much the basement, so to speak, of the whole process. If we want to, and I think you just said it, if we want to go above and beyond what the basement is, as long as we're not breaking the law, we can do pretty much what we want to do. Is that a fair assumption?
More or less. I mean, most attorneys, their job is to initially educate their clients about what their rights are. And then once you know your rights, if you want to come up with something different or get creative, a lot of times I call it horse trading. So this idea in popular culture that in a divorce case, you've got to split everything up. Everything has to be split in half. Sure, that's more or less what a court must do if forced to make those decisions. But if you're coming up with your own agreement, you can horse trade. Uh, we've all seen a husband takes the house and the wife takes the business, or a bunch of the retirement accounts. Essentially, you put together a community property balance sheet and you come up with values, either agreed upon values or known values, and you can create an essentially equitable resolution to your case. And the court's going to let you do that as long as it looks more or less like it's all on the up and up.
Interesting. When we come back, I want to chat with you a little bit about, the thing that I worry about most when I talk about, and I've never gone through divorce, thankfully. I'm 36 years into a life sentence. So, but the one that concerns me the most and what we've looked to protect and educate on since 2010 on Ron Siegel Radio is protecting the kids. So I want to chat with you about that portion of it when we come back. Continue our conversation. We are chatting this morning with attorney Stephen Cawelti. Not giving legal advice. Stephen and I are just having a chat. You get to listen in, and hopefully you'll find some value. If you want legal advice, give me a call at 800-306-1990. I still won't give you legal advice, but I'll give you Stephen's number so you can get legal advice. And we're chatting about family law this morning. And if you missed the last segment, shame on you, but you can get it on our social channels. We chatted about different types of divorces. There's not just the one where you go in and try and annihilate the other person. There are other ways of doing this. Maybe there's probably a reason you got married in the first place. So maybe you can get out of the whole situation as amicably, and you got to talk to a great attorney. But here's the issue that I want to chat about in this segment is going through this whole process, Stephen. Who looks out for the kids?
Well, ideally, the parties are, right? I mean, everybody thinks that they know what's best for their own kids. So, first and foremost, it's the parties. And those parties may have very different opinions about the parenting style or what looking out for the best interests of the kids are. But of course, secondarily, you've got at least here in Los Angeles, the Department of Child and Family Services that's looking out for kids if there's reports of abuse. Um, you've got mandated reporters at school. You've got mandated reporters when kids are in therapy, maybe dealing with some of the fallout from the divorce. A lot of times, parents decide it's a good idea to have their kids with a sounding board, a place of safety where they can talk about their feelings that they're going through. And then, of course, ultimately, the court system, and that doesn't just mean the judges, although that's the most obvious and hands-on approach is going to be the judges that are asked to step in by one of the parties. Um, but also, that system includes child custody evaluators, where they're social workers or psychologists that are tasked by the court to investigate the best interests of the kids and interview teachers and coaches and watch the interactions between the kids and the parties, and then they can report back to the court about their recommendations for the court to possibly implement if the court sees fit. So there's a pretty incredible safety net out there to protect kids. But you may have noticed a theme there, and that is someone's got to bring it to someone's attention. So if the parties are not are going to handle their situations themselves, that's fine. And parental rights is still the number one priority in this state, in this country. So we've got that as first and foremost. But if outsiders see that there are problems, then they can step in and at least ask for some attention to be paid by our support systems.
So, I've never got into this in all the years I've been chatting with family lawyers on the show. So if I'm as a third party see something that looks questionable, where would I go? Who would I be the one to call it? Because I'm not a mandatory reporter, but I
Right.
see A and B, and I see their kids look like they're suffering, and we see so much right now, the suicide rates and all, and the challenges of all the young people. Who would I call?
Well, if you're seeing something, and the example you just described, more than likely a therapist or a school administrator might get involved at that point. If you're talking about kids and self-harm or suicidal thoughts or etc. But I had a recent case where someone called me and said, "Hey, I was putting my kid in the car at the Costco parking lot, and apparently someone didn't like the way I was putting my kid in the car, and I get a visit from the Department of Child and Family Services. Some people call it CPS, Child Protective Services, because a third party didn't like the way I was disciplining my child." Sure, that can happen. You've got to be aware of your surroundings, and if you're not at home, your style of discipline is subject to other people making a decision that can affect your life. Now, that is a rare case. That hardly ever happens, but it does. I will tell you, I have found the Child Protective Services structure in Southern California to be pretty well established. They have good people working for them, despite some headlines. You always hear about the bad things, of course, and there's always room for improvement, no doubt. But by and large, the system does work. And so there'll be an investigation and there'll be a determination that, this was either a one off or this was not neglect or abuse. It's still a big hassle. You're still under the microscope, and that's no fun. So you do need to be a little bit careful. But that's where you would go, Ron, is if you see something, say something, and that is generally what the system wants you to do is protect kids first. When in doubt, and it probably needs to be a reasonable doubt, and there are a lot of crazies out there. But if you've got a reasonable doubt, then you can call 911. You can call the Department of Child and Family Services. Those numbers are easy to Google, and those people make themselves very available.
That's great information. I like and I find it interesting that we have to deal obviously nowadays with a changing society as well. I mean, I was my dad. Obviously I'm old. My dad was raised with a strong hand. I thought that was wise when I finally got to be a parent. I raised my kids with a strong hand, and nowadays you wonder, is that going to be scrutinized more? And worked for centuries, but the society's changing, and sometimes you got to wonder, is it for the better or not? But a lot of question marks out there right now. Continue our conversation. Stephen Cawelti, Did I get it right that time, Stephen? I know I've been pronouncing your name wrong. Stephen Cawelti?
Cawelti.
Cawelti, okay. So I'm still wrong. Cawelti.
Everybody gets it wrong. I'm
Oh.
Polish for as far as a lot of people know.
Okay, so at least I can be in line with the rest of the world's getting the. At least I got Stephen correct. So chatting about and Stephen is an attorney and not giving legal advice. So I like to throw that in there every segment just in case you're just tuning in. We're getting some education. We're having a little chit chat. So obviously, one of the biggest stories we've heard about in this whole family issue has been Blindside. You know, the NFL football player, and apparently he signed a conservatorship, or there was a conservatorship in place of some sort. He thought he was adopted. Is that something that a family lawyer would be helping with, or the family court, or is that somewhere else that they get involved in these things?
Well, it sort of depends on whether it's an adoption or a conservatorship, and that's really at the heart of the Michael Orr matter. Is he's allegedly understood, whether that's reasonable or not, way back when, that he was being adopted, and that would be part of the family court. If in fact it's a conservatorship, that would probably be part of the probate court. Two different court systems that sometimes do interact. And whether or not he had lawyers back then at the kitchen table when the family put the documents down and discussed it with him, I guess that's going to be part of the allegations in the lawsuit, and what a court is ultimately asked to remedy. But it's all family related, as is I think pretty obvious. But it's the intersection of a lot of different court systems. It could even be the civil court that gets involved if there's a breach of contract alleged or something like that. But I know that Michael is looking to get rid of the conservatorship. The family preliminarily, not under oath and not in court, is saying no problem. We'll dissolve the conservatorship. So if everybody's agreeable and everybody's looking to resolve this, I don't think we would be hearing about it in the press. So we're going to wait and see.
Be fascinating. Again, it's all looking out for the kids, so it's a interesting portion of it. So where do you find the big issues where people are? I guess my question really would be, where would you, if somebody decide right now they're sitting and listening to us and they're contemplating divorce, what is their first steps that they need to be doing?
Well, there's a couple of first steps that are, if you will, either sort of emergency or triaging things that you want to get done really before anything else. And one is securing documents, probably mostly financial or having to do with the house, if there's a house or investment property. And that could include making sure that you've got copies of the escrow package from way back when, or the final closing statement for that purchase. Maybe it means historical documents related to your finances, particularly if you came into the marriage with some assets. Ideally, you'll want to have copies of those date of marriage statements. And really, it's collecting the documents. The subtext there is making sure they don't walk away. Because sometimes what I see is one of the parties starts thinking about it before the other party, and suddenly the filing cabinet is empty, or that storage box in the attic is gone, and you don't necessarily know it. It's best not to play games with those things. So making copies is a good idea in case they walk away, but don't take them. Or if you're going to take them, make sure you have them and you're going to be tasked by the court or by the disclosure laws to actually provide them to the other side. Hiding them, stealing them may sound like an interesting short-term goal. I'm telling you, you're going to pay for it. So don't do it. And the other thing is, get your present finances, knowledge about your present finances all together. So your current bank statements, credit card statements, investment statements, the title to the car. Just make sure you have those close at hand, because practically before you do anything else, unless it's health and safety related to yourself or the kids, you're going to have to do a full and complete financial disclosure. So will the other side. That includes copies of statements for all assets and debts. And if you've got that stuff together, even before you call an attorney, and you don't necessarily have to do that, but if you have all of that together right from the get-go, then you're going to be miles ahead in terms of the work, and you're going to save a small fortune in your attorney or the paralegal not having to do that all for you.
I'm going to go a little dark here with you, Stephen. When I've gone to various and had conversations, and again, I'm 36 years into a life sentence, so I'm not going to a family lawyer for my own benefit. They all of the family law offices look like they're more secure than a bank. Why is that? I mean, why is there a lot of violence in this kind of law?
I mean, there certainly can be, but generally no. In my office, we generally keep the door locked unless we know someone's coming, because let's face it, people are not always at their best when they're going through a divorce. Their family, for good or ill, is being torn apart, and they find themselves in an emotionally vulnerable, or in some cases, emotionally aggressive state, depending on what's happened in the case. Maybe someone feels that they weren't heard by a judge and they want to take it out on somebody. But that's really, Ron, that's really worst case scenario. The vast, vast, vast majority of people don't face those kinds of things, or at least are not willing to take the law into their own hands. But it's about emotions in family law, and not so much just about money like in other court cases. Lots of people, if you're going to court, you've got money that you're trying to not have taken away from you, but maybe you've got other money, or you can make money back. You only have one family, at least right now, while you're going through this process, and that hits hard for a lot of people.
So the bottom line here is take a step back, take a deep breath, realize that some of these violent issues can cause a lot more long-term detrimental effects on your family, your life. Money is a lot, but it's not everything. And just
That's
remember
right.
that whole concept. Take a deep breath. And if you are the one that's feeling you're dealing with somebody who's being more aggressive and you're listening to us, make sure you get in touch with law enforcement. Don't try and take it in your own hands. Make sure that you call the authorities, and they're trained for this. And just be careful is the bottom line.
Ron, I'll add that the restraining order system out there is very robust, and they take these things very seriously. So if you're in doubt, talk to law enforcement, even have a consult with a family law attorney. Is this abuse? What are my options here? The court system acts very, very quickly to protect victims and children. So
tell us real quick, what is our best method of starting? Is it a consultation with yourself, or how do you get started? We only got about a minute, but
sure. Most attorneys will either offer a free or a reduced rate consultation, half an hour or an hour. That way you get some idea of where the issues are in your case, maybe some things you hadn't thought about. You'll get a little bit of education about how the process works. And then you can also test fit the chemistry with the attorney, whether or not that's a good fit for you. You can shop around, but generally, call the attorney's office, see about setting up a consultation, and do some shopping around so that you get a good fit and you're seeing eye to eye. The attorney is there to be as objective as possible. So consider whether you want that pit bull, which the judges know the pit bulls. So keep that in mind and get yourself educated.
Appreciate it. If you want to get more information on this, if you want to meet Stephen Cawelti, give me a call, 800-306-1990, 800-306-1990. I'll be happy to put you in touch.